Right, thank you. Welcome.
Welcome.
Kia ora koutou, good afternoon, Mayor and Councillors.
This is a submission on behalf of Empowered Christchurch. My name is Jan Burney and this is Dr. Jacqueline Tither. Our submission is in 3 parts. Hazards, consequences, questions. Actual hazards versus documented hazards. The damage caused by the Canterbury earthquake sequence has been thoroughly documented. However, much of the information did not find its way to the hazard and risk assessment as required under the National CDEM plan or into the horizontal infrastructure component of the cost-sharing agreement between the Council and the Crown. Once again, this annual plan, the 5th since the earthquakes, makes no allowance for mitigation of hazards introduced by the earthquakes. Tonkin and Taylor Coastal Hazard Report 2015 identified approximately 6,000 homes that were subject to erosion within the next 50 years, now the next 46 years. The NZS ISO 31000 2009 is the risk management standard the Council supposedly works to. However, with the assistance of a lobby group, CCRU, the Council has repeatedly deferred application of this standard to the coastal hazard management, in particular for the erosion and flooding hazards, and has ignored thousands of homes that suffered tectonic subsidence and now face substantially increased flood risk.
The failure to apply the above standard means that the threat to life has been ignored. The activities of the above lobby group, CCRU, have magnified the loss of life risk rather than reducing it to the level required under the ISO standard, i.e. a 1 in 10,000 chance of being killed. Erosion was removed from the Resource Management Act in 2015 and application of the RMA was disabled in the worst affected areas of the city where it is most needed. 9 years after the first earthquake, many thousands of homes have not had the protection of legislation such as the RMA. The New Zealand Coastal Policy Statement 2010 has still not been complied with. Likewise, the policies of the Civil Defence Act 2002 have not been achieved. Data and information on these hazards were excluded from key reports and, most importantly, were not accurately communicated to Civil Defence or to the Ministry for the Environment. As a result, the latest 2019 Environment Report from the Ministry for the Environment shows no erosion risk in the coastal areas in Christchurch.
The consequences. Is this the legacy the present Council wish to leave for the city? Immediate erosion risk affecting an estimated 6,000 properties and medium-term flood risks in large parts of the city. Erosion is an imminent risk for homes and needs to be addressed urgently. The affected properties correspond approximately to the area of the new residential unit overlay. Significant future liability for Christchurch City due to emissions and failure to act against coastal hazards with the threat of a disaster similar to those seen in Edgecombe and Matata on the North Island.
Questions. When will the ISO 31000-2009 risk management standard finally be followed? Where is the annual planned budget for those affected by earthquake damage, in particular erosion? This risk is not insurable. After 9 years of delay, where is the budget for mitigating earthquake-induced coastal hazards? What is Council's solution and annual planned budget for homes that have been left uninsured or uninsurable on erosion-prone land? Thank you for listening to us. Are there any questions?
Thank you. Questions? Aaron?
Actually, I won't ask it publicly.
Glenn?
Thank you. Just having a quick look at that risk standard. What is, maybe you feel like you've just said it, but if you haven't, could you delve a bit deeper on your understanding of the application of that standard to local government and what was that? And territorial authorities.
Okay,
Please.
Hugo?
Yeah, this has been identified as one of the failures of the current approach in a document from Tonkin and Taylor, which is published by Ministry for the Environment, the failure of addressing the risk of fatality, individual risk of fatality. This is a part of this particular risk standard, and by, this is, we've had a very consequential disaster, deadly disaster in Christchurch. This should be a priority to address the risk to life. Instead of that being a priority, that goes into discussion with a lobby group, and it's delayed and has been delayed now for many, many, many years. The fatalities that people that Christchurch is dealing with have been written about in the press. People are just dropping dead of stress. We got breadwinners. We got families which have lost their breadwinners. This has to be addressed one way or the other. It's not acceptable not to address the risk to life after a disaster like the earthquakes. Totally unacceptable, and I hope that you agree with that.
The adaptation strategy is basically an absence of planning, and it is the planning for a long term rather than the short term. We have short term risks. We have short term, some people, the worst affected from the earthquakes, have had all the loss, liability passed to them.
Maybe just quickly, because you're keen. So your application of risk is quite wide. So you're throwing it quite wide, Hugo and Jan. That's just what I've heard. So it may not be some direct causal thing, but you're saying, for people's well-being, etc.
It's on a community level and on an individual level and a citywide level. There are some sectors of this community, this city, that have been left out of a recovery. They have been left the loss, liability and risk, not just in the short term but in the long term as well, with regards to insurability, loss of values, and even maybe have to remove themselves from their homes because there is no mitigation. There is no planning. There is no plan for those worst at risk, the most vulnerable. The outcome in the city currently is not equitable. And adaptation, going long term, is not equitable. When you have some who, for example, the CCRU are lobbying for a coastal wall or mitigation, when in fact their area rose. It's not equitable. We need an equitable outcome for everybody, and solutions, even with adaptation, has to be equitable.
Agree with that. Sarah, then Aaron.
Thanks so much for that. There's two key things that have been raised several times during the hearings, and there's the earthquake legacy issues and the future adaptation for sea level rise, climate change, and the consequences of that. We've been told by one submitter that the community isn't ready for the adaptation discussion even yet until the earthquake stuff's been fixed. Do you believe that's the case, or do you believe that we should be doing both at the same time and getting on with it?
There is a degree for both at the same time. I wholeheartedly agree with adaptation and looking at the future.
Yeah.
That's a must. It's obvious it's a must.
Great.
But there is some issues now.
Absolutely.
And some of the risk is too high for some people. Some of the loss is too high for some people. Some people advocating for themselves now are not the worst affected. The worst affected have no voice.
That's great. Thank
They
you.
have not been looked after by this council nor by the local government, central government.
Yeah. I think I told you the other day that there is a paper coming to council next week, which I'm not sure has it already gone online, the Yeah, have a look, because it might be worthwhile to come and make a deputation to that, because we will be considering separating the South Shore and South Brighton issues. Raf, did you have a quick question?
Well, a very quick question. I mean, we've heard a lot about this over the last few years. You've come in regularly. What I'm struggling to quite understand is what solution right now would you like the council to provide for you?
The council, I think, has an obligation to lobby very, very, very hard to the central government for funding now and in the medium term for added mitigation of risk,
But what is
of stop banks, drainage, flooding.
Because I think it'd be really helpful if you came with some specific requirements, and then we could work out what the budget is. At the moment, we keep hearing this, and it's quite confusing because we've got the stuff.
Unfortunately,
there's not a lot of clarity around what you're asking for.
Unfortunately, with a lot of what I have been doing with the ECAN Global the global stormwater consent, working party with the Christchurch City Council councillors, we have no the lowest and the worst rung and most vulnerable are not put in a priority. Therefore, if you can't get a priority, you have no voice.
But
You are not given a priority, Ralph.
Okay, well, we've come to the end of the 10 minutes. Aaron, I did miss you before, so have you got a quick question? Or
It is. It's a bit of a clanger though, because I live on the other side of town, but I feel your frustration because I keep hearing this every year about fixing the seawall and the area flooding at South Shore.
Well, no, it's
Not just as we're not South Shore.
They're not
We are
South Shore.
CCRU
They're
is South
South
Shore,
Brighton,
and
they're
they want the
talking
seawall.
I did say
some,
end.
Yeah, some of us have no plans. There is no strategy. There is no plan. There is no attempt to fix the earthquake damage or rivers. The three waters, all of the river, all the water from stormwater, drainage, flood, surface comes to our three waters, the Heathcote, the Styx, the Avon.
Yeah.
We're seeing more and more development coming, more and more. Nothing has been done. Why is there no priority towards the upgrading infrastructure?
Well, look, we did pull the coastal hazards chapter out of the district plan review. That will be coming back. So we will be having those discussions in the next, well, it'll take quite a while, but we'll be moving that.
Unfortunately, the insurance
Okay.
companies
Look,
are...
and the report is up, so it's online for next week. It does, and we'll let Joe know that you want to make a deputation to the council meeting, because I think that would be very helpful.
Yep.
Also give you time to have a look at the matters that we'll be discussing next week.
The insurance companies are withdrawing from those
Yes,
most
and I've
vulnerable,
arranged
and
to-
you have done nothing.
I have arranged to meet with the Insurance Council as a result of the discussion that I had with you a couple of weeks ago. So I've made contact with the Insurance Council to discuss that very issue as I undertook that I would. So I haven't got a date for the meeting, but we have made the direct approach and he has agreed to come down and meet with the whole council.
Good.
Okay.
Thank you
So
very much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for your time.
Much
Can I-
appreciated.